Hello everybody, in this video we talk about the warriors spawner in the game Minecraft Legends, how good it is. And basically I tested out both in PvP and here you can see me testing kind of a sandboxing it to check things, some benchmarking. And if you look at my PvP tier list, it doesn't really place high. And although again I might change things down the road, right now it's pretty low. And well, what's the reasons? We're going to talk about the pros and cons in this video. Right, first of all, we need to know what the meta is right now. The meta is right now are redstone launchers that can, if not destroy your base very quickly, and you can easily destroy your upgrades. Right, and if they destroy your upgrades, that mean that your army is shrinked, flames of creation, your ability to gather resources, or having higher amount of resources because your cap is reduced, is also significantly impacted. And then what you're fighting against is trying to get back to track. And again, it's very easy with the redstone launcher, especially very early in game, to destroy your upgrades unless you build protection for them using protector tower. And actually, from what I've seen, many players actually don't do that. Well, I do that. And actually, one game I put lots of defensive structures. But even then, if you go too much on the defensive, you're going to soon find out that you're going to be on the defensive probably until the rest of the match, until you lose. The other thing, of course, is attacking with lots of minions. The reason for that, especially Cobblestone, the reason for that is because they are cheap. You can quickly do that. You can quickly use them as harassing enemies, confusing them. You can send one here, one there, attack from different direction. They're quite durable. They are very good to dealing with dealing damage to structures as well. And the most important thing, when you bring them into the masses, especially with mossy golem that heals them, it's very easy to kind of make them stay alive longer, and the damage is also spreading among more of your allies, so the effectiveness of the healing effectiveness of the mossy is actually increased. Because again, if your enemies start building structures around you, your base and spawners, they can easily harass you. And eventually, with cheap minions, they can easily breach in. What are you going to do? You go on the defensive. And if you don't have lots of minions to react to that or good amount of resource, they can easily exhaust your resources very, very quickly. Especially if you're going with mobs that actually require more resources to make. So in some way, they're actually exhausting your attack capability resources and forcing you to go on the defensive side. So exhausting resources is one of the strategies. So the warriors. So first of all, if in order to actually spawn, put a spawner there, you need here, you're going to see here, this is the warrior spawner. All right, so we need a redstone, iron, and lapis. All right. So you don't need to max out any of them. It's pretty easy to get it, relatively early on. And it's also good that you try redstone because, again, if you're going for redstone launcher or so, you're already invested in actually gathering that type of resource. However, keep in mind you can only put it at your base, all right? This is one thing to note. Unlike some other spawners where you can be very mobile and put them anywhere, almost anywhere in the world, this one you can put only near your base. But again, they're good at defending because they're very durable, especially with mossy. And if you compare, for example, how much it takes them to actually die from arrow tower, 25 hits, it actually one time was 15, but I think it was with extended structure that the opponent had. Play golem, for example, died from 2 hits from the arrow tower, cobblestone golem 10, grindstone 6 hits, mossy 6 hits. So yeah, they are very durable. So basically, they can also survive with a breach of creepers if enemies decide to use it against your army. Again, if it's a couple of them, they won't survive. But if it's like one golem explode of them, they will survive. 2, they're probably going to fall down and die. And considering the fact that we have the first of stone now, it's very hard to actually react in time. You can get surprise attacked by a few stone golems, and it doesn't really matter if you react in time. Your already structures are already damaged quite a lot. This is good when enemies breach also and try themselves alongside, for example, Cobblestone Golem to breach in and they try to eliminate themselves, hit your mobs. This is a way to kind of counter it because they need lots of hits in order to actually eliminate them, especially if you are coming with mosses, healers. Now the thing is that the meta right now favors offensive plays. This means that I can create really amazing defenses, but again, eventually the redstone can really ignore everything and just hit your bases quite hard from far. And in combination with good strategy and communication, it's very hard to counter it. Also, again, with cheaper minis, you can attack and harass with different areas. So you're gonna, you need to make basically a bigger army to try to counter and at least delay those attacks. I do it a lot. Even as a single player, I can just send enemies here, send enemies to the other direction. It really confuse the enemy. It's very hard to tackle, especially if your minions are quite costly. So basically, you're thinking about, well, lots of defenses, you're already in a disadvantage. But this might change. Another disadvantage is the high resource cost. They cost 10 iron, 5 redstone, and 15 lapis. And they also take 2 flame of creation space. When you're playing 4 vs 4 and you're taking lots of that space, it requires you to invest more in having more flame of creation, those upgrades very early on. And basically when you do that, you're actually limiting your strategic options to react. It depends what the enemies are doing, because you really go kind of a narrow way to actually try to support your warrior army. And keep in mind, if you already position them, you won't probably position them outside, but rather inside, unless you're going to just go with them all the time, especially if you are a defender. And this is better just to bring skeleton, they can deal damage above walls. Now, I'm not saying you can combine things, I'm just saying that for defending, especially if you're putting them inside, it's better to get good value out of your mobs for dealing damage, especially where the meta right now is Cobblestone Golems. And with so much resources and upgrades involved to support it, it's very easy to actually demolish it by just bringing a redstone launcher and attacking your upgrades. And when your upgrades are gone, your army is shrinked and your resource gathering can be affected, and basically you can't really support it no longer. And if you are going with it, especially early on, it's instead of something else. And sometimes, again, because you take space of your army, especially late early game, you can actually interfere with your other teammates' strategies. So it might be good later on where your army are pretty big, but again, the game favors early on offensive strategies, so you might be in a disadvantage in that matter. And again, especially if you want to use quite a lot of them, you actually exhaust your team's resources. You actually limit the strategy, especially if you want to get redstone, for example, because they need both iron and redstone to make, and you take space. Well, this is kind of a limiter, so you need to use them wisely. I'm not saying that you can't use them well, but you need to use them wisely. Now, damage is also higher on less mobs. This means that in order to support, even though they are durable, again, if there are going to be few, because the requirement is high, the damage will spread among few of them. So it requires you to bring mosses and maybe other cobblestone golems to supplement them in order to make them survive. Otherwise, they're going to get, all of them going to get lots of damage, and basically they will fall fast, considering if you bring smaller minions, the damage is split relatively low for each one. The mosses also become even more effective because, again, less damage, mosses can heal faster and make them survive compared to those who take lots of damage because they're just few. But again, this is related if you are making them more also go on the offensive, and you need to support them well. Again, although they are very durable, they can deal good damage, they can still fall down very fast if all of the damage is actually focused on them rather than spread. And maybe in that case, the mosses won't be even that effective, or not that effective, less effective. And of course, as I mentioned, it's very hard to counter masses of mobs. And basically, if I bring Cobblestone Golem, like let's say 20 of them, and even spread them like 3 here, well, what you're going to do, you're going to split your warriors. You know, it's not become less effective. And of course, I can continue spawning them. They don't cost a lot. So basically, I'm just kind of exhausting your capability with your limited army to do anything against my masses of cobblestones. And as I mentioned also, against strong enemies like, for example, the First of Stone, the damage will already dealt while they actually get there. You know, it's very easy to just get a few hits, go out, and you deal damage. And then you're just gonna move around and try to protect against that. It's not easy. Aside from that, it's also very easy to counter a small of warriors. You just bring, for example, if you bring a big enemy, you just bring small ones, and they will just focus in some situation where you don't target properly, or the enemy doesn't target properly, to spread the damage among those little ones rather than actually hitting the big enemies. Then you can use them some way as tanks if you want to, but again, for harassing, compared to Cobblestone Golem, they're just not good at that. Because again, they're just too costly to use, because you spend lots of resources to actually create them, and when they're down, well, basically you are exhausting your resources pretty fast, so you want to make sure they survive. This is why they are good at defenders rather than attackers, although you can use them as attackers as well. And by the way, you can take structures pretty quickly if you have quite a few of them. And if you imagine, for example, them having mosses, well, they're basically very, very doable and very, very hard to take down, even if you have lots of defensive structures. But there are also good counters for that. If enemies, for example, have a frost tower, you know, and there's just a few, it's very easy. Especially if you're going with masses, you can actually confuse the tower. But if you're coming with, you know, just a few, we need to better manage them in terms of targeting and which enemies you actually send through in order to make the best out of them. But they'll be probably easy to counter if you just come with a few of them, especially if you reach the point where you already have towers. I mean, sorry, if the opponent has towers. Now, it take one warrior like 14 hits to destroy, for example, an arrow tower. But again, this can be used even as tanking. I didn't try to use it as a tank yet in a group because it can take lots of damage, and with mosses it can kind of give me more tankiness when it comes to the group and give other more time to actually deal damage. Overall, it's kind of, again, really mediocre when it comes to using it as an attacker, but more testers are needed. But again, most of the time when I use them as defensive mobs rather than offensive one. But again, as I mentioned, I need to test it more. Here, by the way, you can see that it costs 15 redstone, 10 iron, and 15 lapis. This is a lot, all right? Keep this in mind. Especially when you're competing, actually protecting the base against masses of cobblestone trying to attack it. Now, of course, you can bring it to do other things, but this is not wise because, again, if enemies are also fighting at the same place and you start attacking structures, they will try to attack your minions. They also have disadvantage because they're melee. So they can be outmaneuvered using ranged minions as well when they are in the wild and you're facing other enemies. Now, consider the fact that, like any other enemies, they can actually miss their hits. Sometimes. I actually hate when it actually comes with the skeletons. But yeah, I mean, they don't attack super fast, so it was just a bit annoying, but just a bit. So again, because they're durable, they deal very good damage, and they're good defensive units, especially when enemies try to breach in and destroy your units while you're trying to fight them, so they can survive longer, especially when you have a few mosses around. And of course, it's very easy to eliminate the structure. Usually it won't be protected. And using Redstone launcher, you can easily take it out. And if you take out the upgrades, well, if you try to invest in having a good warrior army, well, it's very easy to kind of shut it down. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to use them as the main thing, although maybe when I try it, maybe I find some strategy that does work. I need to play more. But having them as defense units can be a good thing, especially when enemies are aggressive. They try to, you know, you put a few mosses and make it very, very hard to take them down while we actually hit other mobs because they can deal very good damage to other mobs as well. Both mobs and golems. So again, having a few of them is a good option. But again, taking everything into account, it comes also with lots of disadvantages considering the meta and how offensive oriented it is. So whether you try to focus on that, maybe again just late game as a supplement, but again when you get to late game it's not really costly and you can have them, you know, nonetheless. I mean, you already have a big army, you already have lots of defenses, so it's good to have them around. But really the game meta is really early game aggression and try to finish the game as fast as possible. And also bringing masses of mobs and the redstone launcher, let's not forget that. So this is my opinion. If your opinion differs, let me know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching.